My name is Andrew Waite, and I am Director of Product Management at Salesforce.com, here to present to you the session on building application user interfaces with Visualforce. Probably not the first time you've seen this today, but unfortunately I'm not going to be talking too much about forward-looking statements, but in the event that I do, they are just that. Please do not make any purchase decision based on functionality that's not available yet, as it may be delayed or not arrive at all. First thing first, I know many of you probably, how many of you have been to Developerforce/Dreamforce today? Anybody? So they have a listing of all of the sessions there, including this one. And if you go to that page, you'll see links. Probably the first 3 or 4 questions that normally would be asked at the end of the session I can answer right now. Yes, all the demos are up in a package you can download right now, and the link is right there. So that's how you get to all the session pages. And in the footer of every page, I've included a bit.ly link to that directly to this session's landing page. Pretty basic goals for today. I think for an introductory session, most of you, let's just do a show of hands. How many of you have seen Visualforce before? Okay. Good. Okay, so that first one should be pretty easy. How many of you are using it today already? I assume that everyone logged into the Dreamforce attendee portal at some point in the last few days? Yes? Everybody? Yes. You're all Visualforce users. Congratulations. So I'm going to go through some things that common use cases and things that people are doing with Visualforce and goals they're trying to accomplish and how they're being successful with that, just from a high-level use case perspective, and then rehash some of the places where I think you can get started. So what are other people doing with Visualforce? Last year at this time, we introduced Sites, and Sites was a humongous catalyst for Visualforce. As you can probably imagine, the vast majority of pages that are serving as our sites right now are built in Visualforce. The ones that aren't, things like ideas, are actually customizations on top of Visualforce pages that Salesforce built themselves. So we are using this technology at Salesforce to build our applications and products. The Dreamforce Attendee Portal, the App Exchange, as of 3 months ago, has been utilizing Sites in Visualforce ever since then. The Salesforce community has gone up recently with a new version that's all built on Visualforce. Developer.force.com is all built on Visualforce. There's been tremendous uptake, and Sites has been a huge catalyst for that. People are building entire new applications, web-based applications built on our system, lots of content management. I'll go through a couple of cases here in a second of different things people are doing, integrating with public websites. You've seen things like Twitter. I'll talk a little bit more about that you saw probably at the keynote today. Optimizing, and secondly, when you're inside, that's outward facing. When you're inside the application, optimizing the end user experience is really where the sweet spot of Visualforce is and where it saw its success, in large part, right up into and still including after Sites went out. People bringing data in from outside, integrating it in mashup sense, visualizing data in new ways, creating automation. Users clicking a button that normally would take them 5 or 6 steps to do, automated for them. Directed process flow, wizards, stepped processes that make it easier for the user to accomplish a task because it's more directed, and simple, much more simplified interactivity for the user. As I mentioned, lots of complete web applications, lots of our own, but a couple I wanted to highlight here. It's On the Grid is a company that's put up they're in the entertainment industry, serving up content to movie makers. First-run films are produced with material that is sourced from this site, and they built it all on Force.com with Visualforce and Sites technology. A little bit different than what the back end is, which is probably what you're more familiar with there in the background, standard Salesforce UI. Another one, companies creating storefronts. This company in the UK built a mechanism to supply donations to people serving in Africa and developing countries. These are very powerful sites that went up, in many cases, very quickly, and that was part of the attraction to them. And so there's also lots of data in Salesforce already that people want to leverage in public sites and are utilizing Visualforce for that. Popular concepts here are to turn out a partner finder. If you have partners that are represented as accounts in your system, you can expose those through sites and use Visualforce to integrate that in a seamless fashion into your existing website. So instead of just full-blown web applications, we also see just integration with the existing ones. More of the same, where to buy, retail finders and things Seagate put out. All these are, if you haven't seen it, the sites gallery on the developer site has got a myriad of these examples. They fall into a few various buckets. I've described them here, some e-commerce, website, just content management, integrations where they're exposing specific data, landing pages, ideas, community websites, either utilizing our ideas functionality or building their own. But it also goes the other way. So in this case, we're actually flipping the tables a bit. And as you saw today in the keynote, and as you've heard with our Service Cloud 2 message, the integration with Twitter, that's all built using Visualforce. That entire, it's available on the App Exchange today, and it is using the technology that you have, this exact same technology you have accessible in every single instance of Salesforce.com. So outside of the sites case or the integration with external sites, actually just enhancing the user experience of the applications that you have or ones that you may build. How many of you are administrators? Anybody have page that looks this long if you chalked all the screens together? Yeah. Well, this is an org that I use every day, unfortunately. So I face this same pain myself when I'm trying to find information. I'm trying to enter information. I couldn't imagine the person who has to construct that out from the outset. But it's very likely that a stepped process that captures information and directs a user to a certain page based on the information they've provided in that session would be much more streamlined and easy for them to adopt. And we're seeing a lot of that, directed flow processes that people take step to step. It could be one object or it could span multiple. These types of use cases are perfect for Visualforce with its stateful programming model. Simplified interactions. The funny thing is there's probably like 5 different ways to construct this flow, and I couldn't believe that I almost couldn't fit it on one screen with having both the Visualforce example and the standard flow. So what you see here is the process that someone would have to go through if they're entering in a new customer. And by a new customer, I'm defining that as an account, a contact, an opportunity, and the junction between an opportunity and a contact. So there are 4 objects there. And there are different ways to flow through that path that may get 1 or 2 clicks saved depending on whether you can accept the default values. But the general point is we have a very powerful underlying relational database with master detail relationship, lookup relationships. We're expanding the capabilities of that. And with that comes more powerful analytics and reporting and things you can do with integrations. But as you keep going that direction, you end up with a simple task that a person has to accomplish, entering in 4 pieces of information that live on 4 different screens that they have to bounce back and forth, pogo sticking, as we like to call it. And with Visualforce, you can take this, which if you count it up is 8 clicks, 8 clicks of a save and a change in navigation from one page to another to go from the account edit form to save it to the new contact form to save it back to the account, to the opportunity. All of these things, if you're following, this is the golden path. If you keep going over it a certain way, you have to keep doing lookups, and it can be even worse than this. Whereas with the Visualforce page, because we have support with Apex behind the scenes and its transactional nature, you can construct a page, as you can see here, that has fields from contact, account, opportunity, and there's that little role field there for contact role. And with one push of the button, all of that stuff can commit and save in one go. Very powerful. So now you've seen what people are doing with it. I hope that may lead you to the answer of the second question that I asked at the outset. The first one is, what is it? A lot of people raise their hands. How many familiar with the model view controller pattern? Okay. I'll go through this a little bit, but I'll try to go fast. And I've got a lot of actual code to show later. But the basic idea behind model view controllers is to separate the concerns of an application from its presentation, its model, and its controller logic. And so in our application, in Visualforce, that's represented by, in the model layer, you've got our entities. So you define a new custom object, that's an entity. Our standard objects, they commingle. And Apex classes can be used to construct them. In the case I was referring to as a customer, you could envision that customer object as a combination or a struct of a few different model objects put into one. And that provides the interpretation between the controller and the view. The controller hands that information to the view, and the view interacts with the controller through that model layer. And so the points I'm going to focus on for the rest of this are really around pages, components, and controllers. So the view and the controller aspect. Pages, so here's a little bit of what pages look like markup-wise if you haven't seen it before. Not too dissimilar from HTML. In fact, we support HTML and Flex and CSS and JavaScript. And anything else that a browser can interpret and manage, we support with Visualforce. You compose these things with our standard components. You can also build custom components. We have multiple tools. Eclipse, the Force.com IDE based on Eclipse is one. We have an in-browser solution that I'll be showing here in a moment. Visualforce components, we have 80-plus standard ones. They have built-in AJAX functionality so that you don't have to write a bunch of JavaScript to get modern interaction and behavior with your applications and your user interface. As you can see here, we carved out the interface into these bits of components, and there's a couple of aspects here. This is a special one that if you take nothing away from this other than knowing what input field is, it's the magic. You bind it to the controller, and the controller sits behind, and that's where you pass your data back and forth. And that simple expression, contact.salutation, says this field should bind to the salutation field on contact, and it will materialize as a pick list with the pick list options that you've defined in your organization. So that's the basic background there. I'm going to go through a demo use case here. This demo use case primarily centered around capturing a developer profile. You can think of it as just what your interests are from a technology perspective and where you are physically. And I tried to come up with a use case that expressed some of that notion that I described earlier with respect to the account contact and opportunity contact role. One where you really want the data to be flexible so you can report on it and act on it and analyze it in various ways, in powerful ways. But you also want to make the experience of managing that data straightforward to the user who's utilizing that system. Okay. Let's hide this. Okay. More space there. Okay, so this is the application I was referring to earlier. It is, if you go to that session page, it's there for download from the App Exchange. But I'm going to go ahead and actually show you the first thing we're going to do is enable development mode. Development mode is a way to develop Visualforce in the context of the user interface. So if I go to my user record here and enable development mode, this is also detailed on a cheat sheet that I believe is available. John can confirm for me in the lounge over here. Very valuable item. You want to get them before they run out. I was told I have to wait. Okay, so now I have development mode enabled. You can just ask for any URL after Apex. And when you ask for that, if it doesn't exist, it's going to prompt you to create it. And I'm going to go ahead and create one. And I just created a page, and it loaded it for me. And I'm looking at it. It stubbed out some sample markup for me. And there's an editor down here at the bottom that I can pull up, and I can see the markup, and I can see the code that's underlying that page. Now what I'm going to do here is just start building a page. So we talked about controllers, and that's really the logic layer, the glue between the page and the database. And I'm going to go ahead and take a standard controller for this developer profile. And when I do that, you're going to see one thing happen right away. Immediately selected the tab inside of Salesforce that is associated to that object. So now this page is serving data for that object. It knows to highlight that tab and accept its style motif. So I can add section header, give it a title. And you can see I can start to build that back up. And we talked about the expression binding earlier, which is similar to merge field syntax if you've seen that before, but it's a little different in that it's bidirectional. And so I have access to an instance of the developer profile object, a record, just by utilizing that syntax right there. And now I can call fields on it. So I can get the name. But there's nothing there yet because there's no ID in the context. It has no idea what record to show. So I'm going to go find one really quickly here. Grab its ID. And the standard controller sees that record identifier, goes to the database, and grabs the name field for me automatically because I asked for it. Now, you can bind to an Apex controller, and in that case, you can write whatever SOCL or query language that you want and pull data back from the database to the broad extent that we support. You can express what you want from the database in our query language. But the standard controller says, very simply, I'm just going to take that ID, and everything you ask for, I'm going to go get. And as I said, it's bidirectional. So I'm going to take this and now turn this into a form. Give a little UI treatment here, which is one of the other benefits of Visualforce. We make it very easy for you to mimic the look and feel of Salesforce without having to drop to CSS, which is going to be very advantageous as we are changing our styles in the system, as you may have noticed. Okay, so we get a little block treatment there. There's input field. And there's that expression I just had. Nope, forgot a form. Always good to show how we handle error messages. Okay. So, it's still read-only. It's because it's an auto number. And auto numbers are not editable. So input field knows that that field, it treats it just like it would if it were on the edit page of an actual record. That's the point of that particular component, is to adhere to whatever type that field is and treat it exactly like it would on any other page in the user interface. Okay, so I'm going to actually do one thing here and wrap that in a section, not unlike what you'd see on a page layout. Give it a column of 1 for our purposes here. And when I do this, you're going to see something else happen. It automatically gets split out, and we tease the label out of there. So if the user's language changes to Spanish or Japanese or whatever, that label is actually going to change translation as well, because it is just pulling that information from the same place. The standard UI pulls that information, gets you all the benefit of our standard UI layer, but a tremendously higher degree of flexibility. So let's continue to build this out a bit here. Get some actual fields. All right. Okay, so I add this one. And that is a system required field. So you can see the requiredness indicator there. Do that. Now it's starting to shape up. One or two more things here. Okay. So now we've got lookups. Again, same component. Knows that those are lookup field types. But the interesting thing, let me add some buttons here. So the other thing that the standard controller does is it provides a save routine. Name it save. Okay, so I've almost all but reproduced the exact same form you can produce with our standard page layouts. But that's just, that I went down this route for a reason. And that reason is because I want to make it a little easier for the person to enter this data. Now, this is step one. So what I want to do now, I've already cooked up a couple of custom components that I'm going to replace input field with here now. And it's going to demonstrate a few things for you. I'm going to wrap this in my own item here because I'm not using the standard input field component. Value, this is going to be, I'm going to say location. And now I'm going to pull in my custom component. And call it select country. Bind that to this exact same binding I had to my input field before. Take that input field out. See what happens. So that just changed the interface to that lookup to a pick list. So now all of the records that are in that object are presented as a pick list. So I just converted my lookup field to a pick list. And one of the benefits of being able to do that is I brought another one in here. I'm going to wrap this. Now I'm going to pull in the state value, and then I have to give it, it actually is dependent on the country. So I have to pass in the country value to it. Okay. Oops. All right, so now let's put the state value in there, and I'll be done with that. Okay. So now I no longer have two lookups. I have two pick lists, which are aware of the fact that I haven't loaded any state or province data in yet for the UK. If I go back, I can change that and change the state now to Arkansas. Save that, and now I just did that exact same process you do if you went to a regular edit page and used our standard input components. I took our custom components and all of the standard components that we have in the system that allow that AJAX, that partial page and dynamic nature in the user interface, combine those two together to create a couple of dependent pick lists based on actually lookups underneath the covers. So make that a little bit easier for a user to enter and also put in valid data. Now, when the next part here goes into the data model a little bit more, and this one's actually pretty easy to come by here. So you can see right now that this developer profile has an interest in Flash and JavaScript, and my data model here is such that I have technologies up here on the right at a high level, and I've created a junction between the two. So this is a member. These guys are members. If I go in here, if I click on Flash, I'm going to go up to the technology. So it's a junction object. If I look at the form for it, it's got a technology name and a developer profile name. Basically, the only fields on there, and the number. But adding those is kind of tough. So if I want to go in here and I want to add one, then I've got to go find this, and I might pick one that I've already picked and I forgot. And I've got a rule in there that says I can't do that. I can only have one member that is unique between the two. So then I have to go back. If I want to add a new technology, I have to go over here. And I have to click New. And then I enter it in. And kind of like that same pogo sticking behavior before I showed with the opportunity count and contact, we're kind of getting into that same thing here. But this is the way you want to model the data, because logically, you have technology, you have interests, and they are finite in this case, and you want to associate them with multiple people and use that relational nature in reporting and in the API to be able to do who isn't interested in this technology, or who are all the people who are interested in this technology and where are they? Those are the kind of questions I'm trying to answer with this use case. And entering the data and managing the data can be a bit of a challenge. So, just like earlier when we talked about being able to create multiple records and manage them in one request in one form, I'm going to do that now here. And to do that, I do need to add some Apex, because out of the box, the standard controller does what the rest of the application does, which doesn't really support that behavior, so we have to go a little further. That is what Visualforce and Apex are about. So I'm going to add an extension. Extension is a class in Apex, which I've already brought in. And it didn't really change anything, but it is providing me access to more information. Through that class, I can get at whatever data in the database I want. I can query for anything. I'm not actually restricted to traversing relationships and things, even though that is what I'm going to be doing. So now I'm going to add one more item here. Call it technology interests. And just pull this one in. Select technologies, find memory serves. So you saw briefly there that the type for that attribute is developer technology collection, which is the grouping. But I'm just going to go ahead and dv tech. And now when I do that, if everything goes right, there we go. So now you can see the unification of all of those technologies and which ones are currently existing underneath that profile. I can remove one, add a different one. Now it's not Flash in JavaScript, now it's Apex in JavaScript. And the process, the tedious process of a user going through multiple screens to get at that information has just been eliminated. And if I want, I've also built into this guy the ability to allow create. So the one I want is not there. How could I forget GWT? Oh, no. Foiled. Foiled. It's going so well. Try one more time. Try GWT. There we go. Glitch in the system. So now there we go. It's selected, and off they run. And that attribute supports expression. So if you wanted to check on which profile the user has before you determined whether or not that was accessible or not, that's something that's built into the language, and you can use Apex as well to augment that if what you need isn't accessible in the formula language. Very, very, very powerful. Moves the user interface and experience of users forward tremendously. We've seen tremendous adoption with Visualforce even before sites for things like this. A little bit of time and a little bit of thought, and you can take what takes a user 15 minutes and 20 clicks and make it much more automated and actually fun for them to use the application. So now that I have this data in there, what was kind of my goal here? Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to load a lot of data in here, but I can show you where I was going. check out some of the ways you can integrate this into the application. So I have that actual, before I go to the eye candy, the built in with the system, and also what makes it very, very powerful is to override various actions in the system. So I can take that form I just defined, and now I can use it in the system as the page to create new profiles. So now anywhere in the application I go to create a new profile, I'm actually going to go through that page. And I'll get that experience rather than the regular experience, and I can create what amounts to 5, 6, 7 different records in one simple screen. The other thing, so now that I had that data in there, I had one more component that I've had for a little while. And this is, again, this is all in this package, so let's go there. So I just overrode the tab. So I had a Visualforce page I'd already made. I forgot the name, so that's why I had to override it. And this is actually now visualizing that information that I have. I only have one developer in there right now, developer profile in there right now, so it's not quite as interesting as I would hoped it would be. But you can kind of get the idea. As I want to see where these developers are in the world. And if I have also the interests, I can see where the Java developers are, or where the Visualforce developers are, or where the Apex developers are, the people who have interests in these technologies. If I can get them to use this system, and part of this is a sites page, which is why you see on the side here. So some of the things that if I were to go to the standard, I'll go to the standard technologies page. So our standard tab page is customizable. You can add whatever fields you want to the overview, and you can go to the list page, and you can see the records that are in there. But what gets more powerful is when you can actually create visualizations for that data. This is actually using the Google Chart API, which is fairly, it's been around for a while. They have a more modern one now based on JavaScript, and there's lots of different visualization technologies you can leverage to present information in ways that you can't in normal standard pages in Salesforce. And so you can unleash your data, if you will, by exposing it to these types of components. And this is just another Visualforce page and a series of components, and I've leveraged that Google Chart API to pass the information across in their format. Now I can also, I can override the edit page. I can override the tab page. You can also bring pages in line into standard pages. So if the detail page, if it's just fine for you, you just need to add something to it to make it a little more interesting, a little more robust, then you can bring that in with Visualforce as well. And if I take a look at the states, I actually added the state map to the U.S. country here. It's actually on all of them, but only the states supported. But it kind of shows the flexibility of being able to utilize these components in multiple places, which is really the part of componentized user interface. Okay. All right, let's go back. So what haven't I shown? What else can Visualforce do? How many people have seen our quoting feature that's coming out? Built on Visualforce. Same technology that you guys have accessible to you to build whatever type of document you want. The process is basically to build a Visualforce page and add that attribute that you can see up there, maybe a little small, I apologize, to the page definition, and it will convert a page into PDF format. And the response comes back, it will be PDF. Accessible in Apex, accessible in the UI, also supported in our email template infrastructure, which the quoting team is also using to deliver their quotes via email. Same technology under the covers. So you can take the power of Visualforce, you can add custom components to them, expose Apex routines, all these powerful things to email templates. And that was introduced last year and has been been very popular as well. Mass update, edit pages, administrative tasks, things that normally are very tedious in nature can be automated with Visualforce fairly easily because of Apex under the covers operates at system level and can reach out across the system and act on data, and very, very powerful and very popular. Hooking it into custom buttons and links, so any place you can stick a button in the user interface, you can bind that to Visualforce and leverage all of these capabilities and manage data that you otherwise might not be able to on a privileged basis. Recently, we introduced the ability to create dashboard components with Visualforce. So now you can utilize a Visualforce page to augment our existing standard dashboard features, either with data from outside the system, maybe perhaps. Customers have been doing that. Also, aggregating data across objects that they can't really do otherwise in our infrastructure for dashboards and reports. You can also expose tabs in our mobile clients. There's a special API to interact with the actual client itself that you can leverage through JavaScript and you can embed in your Visualforce pages. We're actually getting through this pretty quickly, so we're going to have a lot of time for questions, which I hope is good. So some of the key takeaways: very easy to manipulate these pages, starting from scratch, few minutes, had a page up and running with functionality that I'm sure one or two of you at least have heard or have asked for. It is attainable now. It just requires a little more aptitude than our standard page layouts, but hopefully you realize that it's not quite to the level of degree as Apex necessarily. Lots of things you can do without it. Highly flexible user interface, optimizing for those user tasks that involve multiple objects, making it easier for them to utilize the system. And why you should use it. Biggest reasons, what I just said, and publishing information publicly. Our site's technology has been adopted wildly, and Visualforce has seen a tremendous uptake from it. Tons of use cases, simple landing pages, content sites, delivery of content, all kinds of things that are possible. Increase email effectiveness by creating richer email structures, customizing mobile, integrating external services, either publishing an endpoint, as people do with Visualforce, or consuming external services and bringing information in. So it's either consuming Twitter or interacting with Twitter, as our Service Cloud team is doing, or it's going the other way and on a site pulling information out and exposing that to the world. Where might you start? Developer.force.com/Dreamforce, or that little bit.ly link down there if you want to just get access to the code and everything that I just showed in our session today. Do not leave without the cheat sheet and the workbook. Those are very valuable starter tools for you. The cheat sheets, John and the team did an excellent job on those. I highly recommend that. And the workbook, if you have an interest in moving forward, it's well worth the time. Written very well, very progressive in nature. Keep going until you can't go anymore. There's examples in the new examples in the new update to the fundamentals book for Visualforce as well towards the end of the book. Those are good places to start. There's lots of introductory material as well linked to from my session page on the developer site as well. And don't forget, we have a free 100 users edition that includes sites with a pretty healthy amount of page hits and resources available to you in that Sandbox. It's a full-blown Force.com edition, and get it while it's still free. I don't know how long. I don't think they have any plans to stop it, but I would do it. And please send session feedback. We are doing that online this year. I think those are all my messages. Question and answer, please. Is there do we have a mic? Thanks.
I've got a I've got a company intranet site that I think I will eventually move over to Salesforce sites using Visualforce. That's going to be kind of a little bit of a large project for various reasons, but in the meantime, I think I've got some data that I would just like to expose in our existing HTML site. Is there any way that I can pull that data out of Salesforce and just show it there, or do I have to use these other mechanisms?
Well, if the data is in Salesforce, then there has to be some way for your external web server to access it. I mean, if you don't want Salesforce actually serving it direct to the end user, you want it going through, then you're going to have to consume it either through our public API, or you can actually expose it as a Visualforce page that's XML-based, whatever structure you want. I know I've built RSS and Atom feeds with pages, and could do the same thing, and then act as an intermediary if there's any reason that you would want to do that. I mean, porting HTML, I didn't get into some of our templating features or anything like that, but it's not, trivial in some cases, but there's a cliff. Once you get past the cliff, it's a lot easier to manage and maintain, but you got to get to the cliff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so you know how there's this instruction on how to build like tab accounts, for Visualforce pages with tab accounts, and a lot of the related list items have unique names and whatnot. But where's a good resource to get, because with account history, it's like an odd name, or approval history is kind of a name that's not part of the ending clips in the IDE there. Like, where would be a good resource to find the names of these components so that we could build these Visualforce pages?
Yeah, the doc team is working on getting some of those relationships docked, because they're the general rule of thumb is for related lists and you use the child relationship name. And to get the child relationship name, you can go through either our WSDL. Our WSDL, the enterprise WSDL, will expose that information. That's where I go if I can't find it anywhere else. There are a lot of the custom relationships you can find in the application. They're on the relationship field detail page. But if you want to see all of the child relationship names in the entire system, the enterprise WSDL is the best place to go right now.
I have a need or a desire to remove the Save and New button from an existing custom object page layout. Is there a way to use Visualforce to do that without rewriting the whole page over again in Visualforce? Can I leverage the existing write-up and just remove that button?
Yeah, you're talking about the edit page?
Yeah, and been reading. There's no simple way to get rid of the Save and New, and I thought maybe Visualforce would be a way to do it.
Simple is a subjective term. Yeah. But yeah, no, if you mean is there a way to not lose the page layout management of the page and take the Save and New page button off? No.
No. I mean, it looked like you created a brand new page there and it just had Save. But I'd have to rewrite the whole page over again. I already had kind of...
How often... So this comes up a lot, and we're working on a solution to that. But the question I always ask is, how often do you make changes to your pages?
This page I'm going to make, in terms of with the layout or the fields.
Yeah.
I think once they're built now, they're going to be pretty static. Yeah. And I just don't want the users for this particular page to hit Save and New, because the behind-the-scenes functionality has multiple record types they can choose from. I don't want them seeing that. And so
sounds like you may have some more need for Visualforce there to me. But generally speaking, I think this is a tough animal. People love our page layout editor, and I don't blame them for loving it. It's awesome. But you have to weigh the usability of the system that you have that's bound to that for as long as it's the rigidity of that system. And it's a balance for our declarative drag and drop point and click customization model. In order for that to keep being easy, it kind of needs to be bounded, right? And so, there are lots of things you can do in Visualforce without getting super technical, which is part of the reason it's been very popular. But, the thing I always remind people is when they're really hesitant to let go of that page layout editor is, think about how often you're making changes. I mean, if you're making changes to, fields and sections 4 times a day, then, it's a non-starter. But if you're doing it, I was talking to a big customer who was having a problem with this, and I asked him when the last time they changed a page layout on the object in question, like 6 months ago. Okay. So 6 months of enhanced usability versus however long, much more time it would take to manage that page. It's you have to evaluate that. But we're working on it. Not fast enough. Yeah, there are a few different angles coming at us with that same need. As Salesforce itself consumes Visualforce more and more to deliver features, quoting, email templates, more standard application pages that become not as customizable because of that reason you just alluded to there. There is a lot of pressure, and it's the biggest thing is that we have so many use cases to evaluate and come together with a design that it's really hard. And as you can imagine, taking a attribute and component-based UI framework, the complexity of the tool for it can get pretty big. And we're trying to find that right mix of keep it simple enough so that people are comfortable. Who are comfortable now, but give power to people who are still hungry, and that's a tough balance to have. And so, yes, we are working on that, but it's been a bit of a challenge because we have a lot of stakeholders.
A quick question, I guess, is the field level security. When you set up a field there, or reference a field there, does it automatically inherit kind of the field level security?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So key thing to know, and this is a bit low level, but important because it's a security concern. Apex operates its system. It can read-write any field that's system read-writable, regardless of what the user can do. But when you bind input elements or data elements through a page, as it goes through the page, we enforce all of that security. So you may be able to compile a page with a reference to a sensitive field, but if the user doesn't have access to that field, either it's read-only, it will appear read-only just like the auto number field did, or it won't appear at all. It will just render false, effectively, if the user doesn't have visibility rights to the field or the objects in any of the path to that field. So that's the other thing I didn't get to show in this example was kind of like spanning formulas, we can traverse relationships. And so from a contact, I can show the contact's accounts, owners, manager. And I can traverse all of that with that dot notation that you saw me building the page with. And if any one of those elements along the way, not a really good example probably, but if any one of those elements along the way stop me from getting to owner-manager, then I wouldn't see it.
Kind of a quick follow-up to the gentleman who's standing here before me.
Yeah.
Is there an easy way, say you've built a page using the page layout editor, and you just want to, can you grab a copy of the Visualforce code that basically made that page to use as a cheater to then go make that page and just remove the save button?
I have seen more than one tool on the App Exchange for that.
Oh, okay. Any ideas? I'll just go look.
Yeah. Page layout converter, I think, will find them for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
When the UI changes are made available, will there be similar Visualforce elements introduced for some of those new
layout features?
We're in the process of doing this right now, and the goal is to not change our Visualforce componentry at all. And if you used the components that I was using up here today, and you saw it produced our standard user interface idiom, that same custom page, when the organization chooses to flip on the new skin, will look right in the context of the new skin. It will not be old skin. It will update, just like all of our standard pages do. Now, you have a lot of flexibility in Visualforce, so if you've added styles at all, then you may have been basing some of those stylings on assumptions in the hierarchy that are now different, and they may look a little different. But if you just stuck to our bread and butter components and didn't muck with that, then you should be good. Okay. The question was when it's rendered, is it instantiating the object? So the controller passes the object to it, and it's already instantiated by the controller, the object itself. And then there's an adapter layer that adapts the components to that model. Oh, yes. The compiler will prevent you from saving it against something that doesn't exist. Is that all the questions? I know you want to ask something, Pete. I can see it in your eyes. There we go. So this, just for the system? Yeah, so there's a feature that came out, I want to say a year and a half ago or so, called the Metadata API, which is an XML file-based structure that gets out all of the metadata for the application. Page layouts, custom object definitions, Visualforce pages, Apex classes. These are all part of the Metadata API. And we have scripting ways you can use scripting, and in the Eclipse IDE also supports moving things around outside the confines of our service. And then we just recently introduced a way to do that on our service, move metadata from orgs, between orgs. That's in beta right now, though. Yeah. The question, thank you, Pete. I'll repeat the question. The question was, when I use the IDE, it doesn't have autocomplete on Visualforce components, and that is true. The IDE has been a little stalled here for a little while, as that team is focused more on the cloud deploy feature that I was just referring to, the ability to move metadata from sandbox to another sandbox or to production. They've been more focused on that. It was, at the time I last spoke with them about it, pretty high on their list. And they actually got the feature they needed from the Visualforce team to know the syntax and everything to do it. They just didn't have the resources. Yeah. It's unfortunate. You have Apex autocomplete or some of it in Eclipse and not online. No one place yet. In the back? Content? Like website CMS? Yeah, there's like, I think probably like 15 different projects out there on that right now. There is some interest inside Salesforce to do something about that, but right now it's being served by the partner community. And there's lots of them.